Well, good morning to everyone. Hope this finds you well this morning on a Tuesday. I'm about to jump right in here. Let me make sure this is all set up. All right, praise God. We're going to jump back in. Morphite Ministries, this is live number 10. Number 10, we are still studying the deliverance ministry of Jesus Christ. So we're talking about unclean spirits and demons and all that stuff. We finished talking about the temptation of Christ in the desert, of course, the wilderness, this past time. And so we're going to move on to the next instance when we see Jesus dealing with spirits, an unclean spirit, a devil, or a demon. All right, so I'm going to go here. We're going to go search. We're going to put our range into just the gospel because we're talking about Jesus and his ministry. Let's search up. What was our terms here? We had unclean spirits, devil, or demon. Of course, diabolos, or the devil, was one of the terms that we found. And I believe we left off talking about, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you in James 4:7, after the devil releases him. And this is a pattern that you can see in your own life and over and over again. Let's see, let's do devil. Devil. Oh, here's the Greek words. Cool. Okay, so demon. Let's look at that. Demonon. All right. Do this. Sort by this one. Okay. Many will say to me that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in the name of cast out devils, in the name of many wonderful works? Okay. So there's an instance. It's not Jesus dealing with devils, but all right. Here we go. Here's one in Matthew 9:33. Matthew 9:33, it says, when the devil was cast out, the dumb spake, the multitudes marveled, saying, it was never so seen in Israel. So, let's look at the context a little bit. All right, we're gonna make this small, because we're now in Matthew 9. So, where is this happening? That was, what, 33? Even a man was kind of talking, was demon possessed, spread the news, the region. What region are we talking about? Let's see. The girl's not dead but asleep. They followed him. Wedding guests. Sat at the house. So it's near Matthew's house, so that's where this kind of story starts from. But where is he at this time? He rose and departed to his house. And their thoughts were thinking evil in their hearts. Entered into a ship, passed over, and came into his own city. Okay, so this is happening in Nazareth, I believe. Capernaum, it says. His own town refers to Capernaum. Let me look at the end of chapter 8 and make sure I understand what's being said here. Well, town came out to meet him when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. So this is after, okay, so we might go back actually, because this is after the, yeah, the Gadarenes. Okay, let's do that one first. So we're gonna go to Matthew 8:28. All right, so this is the story of the demon possessed. And actually in the Matthew's account, he says there's two of them. We usually only focus on one because that's spoken of in the other Gospels. Possessed with devils, coming out of the tombs. Okay. When he was coming to the other side, so this is right after he crosses over, I believe, the Sea of Galilee. But there's a storm. That's when he calms the wind and the waves. And then they say, what manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? So that's what just happened, okay? He's come to the other side into the country of the Gergesenes, and there met him two possessed with devils, coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. And behold, they cried out, saying, what have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a good way off from them, and herd of many swine feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, if thou cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. He said unto them, go. And when they were come out, they went into the herd of swine, and behold, the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea, and perished in the waters. And they that kept them fled, and went their ways into the city, and told everything, and what was befallen to the possessed of the devils. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they besought him that he would depart out of their coasts. Okay, so this is verse 28 through 34. And let's see, there have been two possessed with devils. Let me see here. This is what I think it is. Come on, catch up with me. Okay. Yep. So midway. So here's an unfortunate happening of language here. So let me put down what I'm going to put down, then I'll explain it. I'm to So this term, the daimonizomenoi, is the version of it that's used in this particular instance. However, the root of it is daimonizomai. It means to be demonized. That's, if you transliterated it, it would be demonized, not demon possessed. Here's why that's important, is because you hear a lot of people taking issue with that idea of those who are born again, those who are believers, those who have received the Holy Ghost, being demonized. And if you understand the concept and the way it's explained in the scripture, then there's not confusion. But part of the problem of language, and when things are translated into another language, is there is inevitably a small bit of interpretation that comes with that, because we may not have an exact word that communicates the same thing. So the word daimonizomai means to be demonized. In other words, a demon is influencing or attacking or is in the mix with a person, right? However, in our popular language, and a lot of this is put forward by Hollywood and things like that, we have this idea of being demon possessed, and as it says, it's the translation here is to possessed with devils. Now, the possessed does not mean that the devils owned them. The possessed means that the devils are present in them. In this body, in this temple, there are demons present. In this instance, right? So I've heard, when I was growing up, I would hear people explain it like this. They would say, a Christian can't be demon possessed, but they can be demon oppressed. Well, in the Bible, there's not really any difference between those two things. It's demonized, right? Whether you are completely unsaved and like these men, you're what we would call possessed, completely given over to a demonic influence, or whether you are being demonized as in being attacked by demons. Like in the book of James where it says, resist the devil. Well, obviously there's a devil attacking a person, and that would be demonization. But there's kind of a gradient to that, right? There's levels of, okay, there's a demon that showed up in my presence or in my home or where, on the street, and now I have to deal with it, all the way over into the level of, okay, now this demon is actually in the temple and it's the one pulling the levers, and I've been given over to allowing it control of my life. Or, in between, there might be a level of, hey, I just hear this thing whispering in my ear sometimes, and it sounds pretty good to me, so, most of the time I'll do what it says, sometimes I don't. I liken this to if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings or read the book, Grima Wormtongue is this character who is always whispering in the ear of the King Theoden, and he's always kind of convincing him to do things, or kind of channeling and changing his opinions by just whispering, and just, he never physically forces him to do anything, but he's always influencing him, right? And demonization can look that way too. And in fact, a lot of times when demons show up, and we'll look at this as we go through some of these instances, a lot of times when demons show up in the mix, they don't want to show up. In other words, they don't want to be seen. They like being operating in the background, because then you don't deal with them. You don't know they're there, and they can just kind of influence things. So anyways, let's get into what the Bible actually says. When he's come to the other side of the country, the Gergesenes, so where's this Gergesenes, or Gadarenes is also called. Many manuscripts read Gergesenes, other means Gerasenes, and so where this is actually on the other side of the Sea of Galilee from the Jewish side. So this is interesting because he has entered here. Well, good morning to you too, Gus. He's entered into a place that is not the Holy Land, quote unquote. It's not part of the Jewish land proper. So he has left that, and he's on the other side. So that's what's interesting here, is that he is going out into an area that would not be under Jewish purview. In other words, that's part of the reason the demons are so amazed that he's there, is because it's like, well, you're out of your territory, you're out of your kingdom, your borders that traditionally we would be okay, or we would understand, hey, you do things in that area. But now he stepped across the sea. And this is a hint to us, just a notion of, hey, when Jesus comes, he sets people free across the border, right? He's not limited to salvation. Came first to the Jews, but it's not limited to the Jews, right? That salvation, that deliverance, the power of God manifesting in your life started with the Jews, but it has spread out to all of us, all Gentiles, the whole world, right? In John 3:16, God so loved the world, everybody has a chance to take an opportunity to participate in what God has to offer. And this was just another hint, another instance, another example of that. So I'm going to put that first in it's in verse 28. Jesus crossed the border to, I'm going to say, enemy territory, because traditionally, you look back at Deuteronomy 32, you look at other places, the way that's described is like, okay, the people of God, Israel, that land, that area is dedicated to God and to his worship and to his control, right? But then in the New Testament, when Jesus comes, he starts to expand that, and he starts to show, hey, no, but I'm king of everybody. I'm prince over all of the kings of the earth. I'm not just the king of Israel, the Lord of Israel. I am over everything and everyone. And this is him starting to express that. So he's crossing into what would traditionally, spiritually, be considered enemy territory. And so there met him two possessed with devils, coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. So we see here the characterization of these men. They are, they live in tombs. They live among the dead, which of course means they're unclean, right? In a Jewish sense, like you're not supposed to be touching the dead. And this was obviously, we still have these ideas today, the idea of like hanging around a cemetery, in Halloween and horror movies and all that. You see all of this idea of like hanging around with the dead, skeletons, zombies, all that stuff. That's obviously, corruption. It's things degrading. It's things falling apart. It's death. It's chaos. It's all of those things. Like that's where they lived, right? That was their environment. So that's what they knew. And it's strange that you would live in a tomb, right? That you would spend your time with, not just with the dead, but that's where you would take up residence. So they came out of the tombs. They were very violent, as it says in this translation, exceeding fierce, it says here. So kalepos, harsh, difficult. These guys were difficult, right? Or violent. Two passers-by. No one was able to pass by that way. So they're stopping the flow of traffic. If you've ever seen a protest, like an environmental protest or something, these guys were that, but to the next level. They were attacking everybody, right? So the men live among the dead and are violent to passersby. So then Jesus shows up. And behold, they cried out, saying, "What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time?" So these demons, what to us and to you? Before the point of time. So the demons recognize the authority of Jesus Christ, right? Because when he shows up, they immediately know Jesus. They know his name. They know he's the Son of God, right? And behold, they cried out, saying, "Son of God, leave us alone." The phrase that's used is a Greek idiom, "what to us and to you." Ti heimen kaisoi. It's Semitic in origin. It made its way into colloquial Greek. The equivalent Hebrew expression had two basic meanings. When one person was unjustly bothering another, the injured party could say, "What to me and to you?" meaning, "What have I done to you that you should do this to me?" When someone was asked to get involved in a matter he felt was no business of his own, he could say to the one asking him, "What to me and to you?" meaning, "That is your business. How am I involved?" These nuances were apparently expanded in Greek, but the basic notions of defensive hostility and indifference or disengagement are still present. BDAG suggests the following as glosses for this expression: what have I to do with you? What have we in common? Leave me alone, never mind. So these guys are kind of like, who are you, whatever, not who are you, because they obviously recognize him. Hostility between Jesus and the demons is certainly to be understood in this context. That's the translation, leave us alone. So this is interesting because it's an idiom, it's a phrase that doesn't really transliterate culturally, right? But that's the phrasing, what have we to do with thee, or what do you have to do with us? It's like, what's your business here, is kind of the idea, right? Jesus Christ. And are angered by his presence. I'm going to put in parentheses. What are you doing here? So they understand he's God. They understand that he is. He has some reason why he's there. He doesn't just show up for no apparent reason. And the thing that they lead to, that they mention, is, have you come here to torment us before the time? So in other words, they're also afraid. So I used the wrong thing there. They're afraid of the coming judgment. So obviously, they understand that there is a time of judgment to come, and they actually say, have you come here to torment us? That's an interesting phrase. Torment. Basanitzo. So they obviously have a lack of respect for him while still recognizing his authority, because they're kind of like, what are you doing over here? But they're also kind of scared. They're kind of they're talking loud, right? You notice this a lot of times when you deal with anything demonic, anything from the devil, is that there's a lot of loud talk. Not a lot of action, not a lot of power, but a lot of loud talk. So have you come here to torment us before the time? And they're accusing him already, right in that moment, right? So they're trying to make him look bad or feel bad about what he's doing. Oh, you're just here to torture us. You're just here to kind of get your kicks out of beating up on some poor little devils, So they, obviously their whole mindset is corrupted. What does Revelation 12:12 say? Oh, it's in Greek. Can I get this to switch? Yep, trash talk. Switch this to there, okay. That way when I look it up, I don't know if I showed you that in Step Bible, whichever Bible you choose, it says, does the ordering of the words. That way when you do these references, it will pull up from that Bible, that first Bible you have in the columns there. So, where was that? Torment us, there it is. So I click on this reference here, it'll pull it up in King James here. Rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devils come down unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he had but a short time. It's an interesting cross-reference they have there. What have you to do with us, the Son of God? O Son of God, have you come here to torment us before the time? So they are afraid of their judgment. I already put that, okay, they're afraid of the coming judgment. And you notice, until this point, Jesus actually hasn't said anything. And you see in the other passages, the other renderings of this instance, that he does ask the name of this demon. And of course, that's where we get the idea of the name of Legion, because there's many of them in these men. But in this, I think it's interesting that in this rendering, he doesn't show what Jesus is saying, or that he says anything. The very first thing he says to them is go. So the devils besought him, saying, if thou cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. They ask to go into the swine. And 32. So part of the reason this is important is because, for one thing, this tells us that the devils can go into swine. All right, so we just learned something about demonology, about how demons work, is that they can apparently go into swine. They can what is that, into? Send us away into the herd of pigs. If you're going to expel us, send us into the herd of pigs. So in other words, if you're going to send us away, if you're going to cast us out, as it says here, don't just send us out with nothing. In Jesus' teachings, he talks about how when an unclean spirit leaves a man, it goes into desert places and he wanders around. And then he talks about, okay, when the devil comes back, because he's going to try to check back into the hotel he was staying at before, he's going to come back to your temple, your host body, and he's going to check it out and see, like, well, maybe I can slip back in here. And this goes into a whole belief about, what demons actually are, whether they're fallen angels or they're disembodied spirits of fallen abominations from before. But since we're just focusing on how Jesus dealt with them, I'll say this: when he casts them out, he does cast them into the swine because they asked that of him, and he honors that request. But they obviously are afraid of just being, or they don't like the idea of just being cast out into the ether, so to speak, like just kind of wandering, because they want a body. They want to express themselves. They want to have an influence. They crave a place to call home. And so that's why they asked him to send them into the pigs. Now, the reason why the pigs then go down and kill themselves and all of that, I don't know. And maybe that's them kind of giving a last hurrah, or, giving him the finger kind of thing. I don't know. I do know this is an interesting story because there was a Greek tradition in this time, in this area, where they would go into a time of worship of a false god. I'm trying to remember the name. I can't remember off the top of my head. But there was a false god that they would be worshiping during that time. It might have been a Bacchus ritual, which he had, of course, they had different names. The same gods had different names in Greek and in Roman tradition. But in this ritual, they would be getting drunk. They would be having these horrible orgies and all of this kind of stuff, and some of them involved swine. And the idea was that the whole mix that was going on there would invite these spirits who would then be able to transition between the swine and the humans and would be comfortable in that whole thing, and it would be an act of worship really to these false gods. So when you know that cultural context, then this story is interesting, because you see then after he does this and after the swine die, that then everybody comes out and says, oh, please leave. Like, we don't want that happening here. You're ruining our game, right? You're messing with our little kingdom, our little spiritual thing, the way it's set up. You also realize that obviously, again, we mentioned this earlier, but obviously this can't be within a group of Jews because there's a herd of swine. They're raising swine. Swine to the Jew is unclean. It's not food. You shouldn't really be, messing with it. It's unclean. So obviously these are not Jews, or if they were Jews, they're, backsliders, right? They're not interested in following the actual commandments of God. So this again is just another showcase of how he is stepping out into an area where the influence of the Old Testament, the influence of the law, is not respected or is not actually held to. All right, so let's finish this up because we're almost out of time. Devils besought him, if thou cast us out, cause us to go away into the herd of swine. So cast us out. Let me get that word there. Ekbalis. Ekbalo means to expel. Take out, remove, drive out, expel, bring out, send out. Here's where we get our idea for what people would say casting out demons, right? Is a term like this, ekbalo, which means expel. They're being expelled. They're being told, we're out of time. They're being told, get out of here, right? And the first thing he says to them in this passage is, go. And that's all he says. They ask him all this stuff and everything, and he just says, go. Pago. Upalete. Pagete. To lead, to bring under, to lead or bring under, to draw on or away, to depart, get behind me, be gone. All right. To go away. So that's how he deals with them. tells them to go away. So here we see the first instance of him casting out demons. Before, the passage where he was dealing with the devil that came to him, no one was possessed. The devil was just talking to him, right? And he dealt with that devil by using the word. And then this time, he doesn't do any of that because these devils are in people. He just tells them to go, get out of here, go away, right? Be gone, whatever way you want to say that. So that's really the main thing that we see here. Tells the demons to go. Alright. So that's really the main thing here, is that it's not a big performance. There's not a lot of, I mean, there is some excitement in the sense that, they go into the swine, and then the swine run down into the water and they die and all of that. And they kept them fled. People react to it, but he doesn't do some kind of big dance or a ritual or anything like that because he has authority, right? He has power. And so he just tells them, go, right? He's not fighting with them. He's not struggling with them. He's not wrestling with them because they are under him. They're under his authority. They're under his command in that sense. They don't obey him on a day-to-day basis, but when he shows up and he tells them to do something, they have to do it. All right, so we're just going to finish off with that for now. Tells demons to go. 8:32. And then real quick, I just want to add this on here. The result is that everyone testifies about it, right? The herdsman ran off, went into the town, told everything that had happened to the demon-possessed men. Of course, they ask him to leave because they're like, hey, we don't want that happening here. But everyone talks about it. Verse 33. Everyone testifies of what they've seen. And that comes back to the reason why deliverance ministry, as it might be called, or casting out demons or anything like that. The whole point of that, it's not so you feel good. It's not so that you can get a win. It's not so that there can be a spectacle and you could get a crowd or anything like that. In fact, here he didn't even really have a crowd other than his disciples were with him and the herdsmen of the swine. That was it. And they're the ones who went and told everyone else, who then came and said, hey, yeah, we don't want that here. He didn't gather a bunch of people around and say, all right, watch what I'm going to do. He just dealt with the issue. He just said, all right, you go, get out. You're not welcome here. We're not having this. And so it was really him almost showing off in a way his authority of just expressing that, yeah, I'm the king of this area too. This is my territory as well, and it will be. But it's not to boast or to aggrandize himself. And you see that throughout Jesus' ministry when he does miracles and things. He doesn't wait for the crowd to form to do a miracle. He'll heal people on the side of the road. He'll touch a group of lepers that come up to them, obviously outside the city because lepers weren't allowed in the city, and those kind of things. He's not doing it for the notoriety and the fame. So when you're contrasting this with people who do deliverance ministry, this is something to take note of and say, hey, if somebody is looking to deliver people, help people, obviously, deliverance, the whole idea of that, the whole idea of casting out devils is so that person's free, right? They can now make choices on their own. They're no longer subject to and controlled by and demonized, by these spirits. So, somebody should be free by the end of this thing, and nobody's trying to get fame and fortune out of this. If you see anybody who is claiming deliverance ministry or something like that, and they're in it for the money, and you can smell that by any means, then no, they're not doing it of God. They might be doing it in the name of Jesus, but God's not pleased with that kind of a ministry, right? And here we see him expressing that or giving an example of that. All right, we're going to look at a couple more of these verses over the next couple of days, and then we'll move on to another topic. If you got any comments, you got anything you want to add, please throw it down in the comments, in the chat, or wherever. Make sure I don't have any chat. I haven't looked at that. But otherwise, we'll catch up with you guys again tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless.